Okay, so everyone is in a different situation than they are usually in. And it's natural that we think about ourselves more than we usually do because we're not doing the same kind of things we usually do, and we're more by ourselves, we're more in the same place for longer periods of time. And my grandfather, before Gumnal Vashalom, used to say, the difference between a normal person and a crazy person isn't much. A normal person and a crazy person equally have all kinds of feelings. They have feelings of anger, feelings of frustration, feelings of happiness, feelings of sadness, feelings of embarrassment. The difference between a normal person and a crazy person is only that a normal person doesn't think about himself all day, and therefore his feelings have a limit. He gets embarrassed, but it's with a limit. The crazy person, all he has to think about is himself, and therefore when he gets angry, he's ready to kill somebody. When he gets embarrassed, he's ready to commit suicide. When he gets happy, he dances outside in the rain. And so the difference between normal and not normal is how much you think about yourself. So my grandfather used to say that that's key to keeping your sanity is not thinking so much about yourself. And it would seem that, because everyone has more on their plate now than they usually do, it would be natural for us to think more about ourselves and just take care of all the stuff that we have on our plate that we don't usually have. But the truth is that the healthiest thing to do is to reach out and to think about other people. And it's not just beneficial, not just altruistic, and not just a nice thing to do, but it's the most healthiest, the most beneficial thing to do. And as we shall see tonight, even in situations where it would seem that you can't do anything, it's precisely in those kinds of scenarios that your thoughts and your direction to try to do what you can and more actually lifts you up and puts you in a different zone of tranquility and happiness and peacefulness. So this week we're learning about the Metzera. Metzera is commonly translated as someone who has leprosy, but we know it's not leprosy. Leprosy doesn't affect clothing. Leprosy doesn't go on the walls of your house. But this week we read about the tzeras, how that this disease, it would affect your house, it would affect your clothing, it would affect your body, and it's clearly a spiritual thing. Instead of going to a doctor, to going to the hospital, when you had tzeras, you go to a kohen. So it was a spiritual thing, and it was connected to it was a spiritual malady that God sent to a person to rectify issues of arrogance or issues of lashon hara, tale-bearing. That was a purpose of this malady. That's why God sent this malady to a person. There are 3 different words the Torah uses to describe the various colors of and various kinds of this disease. The 3 words the Torah uses are se'es, sapachas, and beheres. And these are the 3 convincing arguments that the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, uses to try to convince us to say the wrong thing. Se'es means to be uplifted. One of the common reasons people speak ill of others is because they want to boost themselves up. So how do I boost myself up? I make fun of you. If I make fun of you, I feel better about myself. That's se'es, to uplift yourself. Another reason people speak ill of others is because sapachas. Sapachas means to join something else. You want to become part of the in crowd. You want to become part of the group. How do you become part of the group? The way to become part of the group is by scorning people, and then that way you're joining this. You're making a funny joke, and you're making something that's funny, and therefore people, you're invited in. So people do say hurtful things for the sake of sapachas, for the sake of becoming part of a group. And the worst one is the best one. The worst one is beheres. Beheres is the very convincing argument of the Yetzer Hara that there's really nothing you could say to it when it rears its ugly head and tells it to you. The Yetzer Hara says beheres. Beheres means clarity. You have to be the voice of moral clarity. You have to say things the way they are, and therefore you have to expose other person's wrongdoing. okay, it's wrong, but it sounds so justified and so right and so juicy. So why not just say it? So that's the argument of the Yetzer Hara, either to lift yourself up or to join the crowd or to be the voice of moral clarity. That's why you have to say Lashon Hara. That's why you have to say what you shouldn't say. So those are the various causes of why we may say the wrong thing. And the Torah says that the guy who has his tzaras, he's supposed to go to a Kohen, and the Kohen examines him, and if his skin color has changed, so then he is healed from the disease, and he goes through a purification process. We've discussed before, I don't know if you recall, beautiful teaching based upon the Ramban. The Torah uses an unusual word for color over here. The color of his skin changes. The word the Torah uses for color is eino. Eino could also be translated as his eye. His eye changes. Instead of looking at things with his left eye, instead of looking at things with a critical way, the Torah says his eye changes to looking at things in a positive way. That's why his skin color changed, because he's no longer that critical guy who is saying all the Lashon Hara. He's now a guy who's able to see the positive in others. His eye changed. He doesn't see things through the lens of his left eye. He sees things through the lens of his right eye. And that's what the word nega actually has the letter ayin at the end of the word, on the left side of the word. In Hebrew, the end of the word is the left side of the word. There's another word which has exactly the same letters, oneg, which means pleasure, and it also has the letter ayin, same letters as nega, same letters as disease, but the ayin is on the right side of the word. So the Torah says the Kohen comes to see, has his eye changed? Is he looking the same way he was before, or has he changed the way he looks at things? Is his eye on the left, or is his eye on the right? Is his ayin, the letter ayin, is it on the left of his world? If it is, if he's looking at things with the left eye, then he is diseased. He's suffering himself. He's living with all this animosity and hatred and anger and frustration because he's looking at things in such a critical way. But if the Kohen sees that his skin color has changed, that means that his eye has changed as well. And he's looking at things in a positive way. It's the only really punishment in the Torah. Every punishment in the Torah is all for the sake of bettering our character, and it's all kindness of God. But this is the only Pinocchio kind of thing, where the Torah directly shows us how God's sending something to better us, to make us better at life, to give us something positive, to make our lives better. Hashem sends us this thing, and it allows us to go through this spiritual process, and then when we do, our perspective changes, and when our perspective changes, so then our skin color changes, and we're relieved of the disease. But just because your skin color has changed, there are a couple more parts of the process. As we'll see in the second section of this week's Torah portion, the Torah says, the Kohen tells the guy to take 2 birds, and one bird is set free, the other bird is slaughtered, and the bird the live bird is immersed, and you have to take a rod of a cedar tree, and you have to take a hyssop, and you have to take this, and the hyssop has to be dyed crimson, and there's a whole process. So what's the meaning of this process? It's all part and parcel of the guy's rectification spiritually. The idea of the cedars grow very tall trees, which represent arrogance. The problem is the guy is so arrogant, that's why he looks so down at other people. The Torah says so he should take a hyssop. A hyssop is something which is very low, which represents he has to lower his arrogance and not be that way. And it's colored crimson. The dye that's used is made by the infestation of worms, which cause this color in the dye. And the worm, of course, is a lowly kind of thing. A telas is a low thing. A worm is low, and that represents a person who has this nature of speaking ill of others. He has to lower himself, he has to lower his character. And of course, at this moment, all of us are thinking of people that we know who speak ill of others, right? It's all talking about somebody else. We would never speak anything negative about anybody else. This is something the Torah is talking about other people who have this arrogant problem, right? Well, not really. So the Torah then says you should take 2 birds. Why birds? So birds are very chirpy, and they represent people who just talk about other people without thinking. So the idea of shechting, of slaughtering one of the birds, represents we got to get rid of that negative tendency, speaking ill of others. Shechta, get rid of that. But what's the idea of the live bird? Send the live bird and let it go free across the field. What does that mean? So Kli Yakar explains, this guy has been through a lot. This guy has been through an incredible amount of angst. He's been really challenged. He has learned a lot. So he may think that he should just try not to use his mouth at all. I mean, this guy has been through tsaras. He has this terrible disease. He may think, like, from now on, I'll just shut my mouth and never say anything that needs to be said because he's been through so much. Think about that story of the guy who comes to the rabbi and he tells, Rabbi, I need help. I'm always saying bad things about people. What should I do? And the rabbi says, I have a way to rectify your soul. This is what we're going to do. The rabbi takes out this fluffy down pillow and he opens up the pillow and the feathers fly over the place and the wind's blowing. He tells the guy, get every single feather and bring it back and then your soul will be rectified. The guy is like, oh, sounds great. I'll do that. And he tries to find all the feathers. He comes back to the rabbi after a week and says, I look for all the feathers. I can't possibly find all the feathers. What are you talking about? The rabbi says, well, that's how your words are in the same way. You say stuff and those words they then go, they have a potency and the words go places. And therefore you can't really rectify the words that you said wrong. And therefore you have to realize the first step of rectifying the problem is realizing what the gravity of what has happened. But the rabbi is not telling the guy not to talk. He's just telling him how powerful words are. And therefore, in the positive sense, when you say good things, they also have the same potency. They also can they also say a kind word, a good word to someone else that lifts them up. And that good feeling gets carried over to another person. So my grandfather, was also approached by the Lashon Hara campaign. One of the Lashon Hara campaigns had this campaign that people should stop saying Lashon Hara for 1 hour of the day. It's so hard to stop saying Lashon Hara. Stop saying it for 1 hour of the day. So my grandfather didn't agree with this, and he's very opinionated also. When he said something, he gave it to the guy, and he made sure they heard it. He said, I understand. Instead of going on this campaign, people to stop saying bad things, why don't you tell people that for an hour of the day, they should focus on saying something kind and positive and uplifting to someone else? And that's the truth. The truth is that the guy who shechts the bird has only half the story. Half the story is your words are potent. Well, that's really the whole story. Your words are potent, and therefore shech the one bird. Don't say not nice things, but you got another bird there. You got a lot of things you could say that could lift the world up. So keep on talking. That's the meaning of having these two birds. One bird has to be shech, that represents a negative speech, but there's also the tillim that you're saying. There's also the wise things that you're saying. Those are the words that need to be heard by other people. Don't put yourself in isolation and not talk to anybody just because you've made some mistakes with your words. Realize that your words are still powerful and you could do something positive with them as well. That's what Kli Yakar explains the rectification process. But the process is not finished. There's another stage, another part of the process. Other part of the process is that the man who has had this tsaras, who has this disease, he has to go to the temple and he has to offer a sacrifice. By the way, you could jump in and say something if I'm not saying something that makes sense, or you have something to add, or comment, criticism, tomato and cucumber, a zucchini, whatever it is, or maybe some berry seltzer or green apple seltzer, whatever you have. So you could interject and put that in. I'm all ears. Okay, so there's another part of the process. Next part of the process is he has to bring a sacrifice. What is the sacrifice he has to bring? So it depends. It depends what he's able to afford. If he is a wealthy man, the Torah says he has to offer a sheep as a sacrifice. If he is not so wealthy, so then he offers birds as a sacrifice. And if he can't afford the birds either, then the Torah says he offers a flour sacrifice. So there's a sliding scale of what exactly his sacrifice is. So here's a scenario. Let's say Reuven, for example, is unable to offer a sacrifice right now. He is strapped for cash. He is not able to go to the temple right now. He's not able to do it. So someone says, Reuven, I'm going to help you out. I am going to buy you a sacrifice. I am going to make a pledge to pay for your sacrifice. So let's say Reuven may be strapped for cash, but he's really a wealthy person. And the guy who made the pledge is a poor person. What is the law? What kind of sacrifice has Shimon obligated himself to pay? Once Shimon has made this pledge, Shimon's a poor guy, but he made the pledge to pay for Reuven. Does he pay for the price of the sacrifice of a poor person because he is poor? Or does he pay for the price of the sacrifice of a rich person because he offered to pay for Reuven's sacrifice and Reuven is rich? Or another scenario, let's say Shimon had to offer the sacrifice and Reuven says, I'm going to pay for Shimon's sacrifice. And Reuven is wealthy, but Shimon isn't. What is Reuven obligating himself to pay when he accepts to pay for the sacrifice of Shimon? Is he obligating himself to pay what Reuven, can afford, and if he has to pay for sheep? Or is he obligating himself to pay what Shimon would have been able to afford, but he can't afford right now, and therefore he has to pay for the poor man's sacrifice? What would you say? Anybody has any ideas about the subject? Would it help if I sang the Jeopardy song? No. Anybody? What would you say? Reuven pledges to pay Shimon sacrifices. What kind of sacrifices should he give? Shimon offers to pay Reuven sacrifices. Reuven is rich. What should Shimon give? So the answer is like this. The Rambam says, surprisingly, that it's actually, he says something which seems paradoxical. He says it depends. If Reuven is obligating himself to pay Shimon sacrifices and Reuven is rich, Reuven has to pay a rich man's sacrifice. He has to pay sheep. And if Shimon is obligating himself to pay Reuven sacrifices, then Shimon has to pay a rich man's sacrifice because Reuven is rich. So in both scenarios, you have to pay for the rich man's sacrifice. The question is why? So the Talmud says that in the first scenario, where Shimon is obligating himself to pay for the rich man's sacrifices, for Reuven's sacrifice, in that scenario, the Talmud says the only condition that the Torah allows to let you pay for the poor man's sacrifice is imdalhu, if you are poor. If you're poor, then you're exempt from paying the rich man's sacrifice. But if you're not poor, so you got to pay more. So since the person who sacrificed, he's obligating himself. So if Reuven obligates himself to pay Shimon's sacrifice, and Reuven is rich, he's not poor. So therefore, Reuven has to pay the rich man's sacrifice. But the question is, Reuven isn't obligated in the sacrifice at all. Shimon has to pay for a sacrifice. Shimon is the one who said Lashon Hara. Shimon is the one who has a disease. Reuven is just obligating himself to pay Shimon's sacrifice. So if Reuven is rich and Shimon is poor, why should it matter the fact that Reuven is rich? Let's say Shimon is in section 8, and he is getting $1,800 off of his rent. So instead of paying $4,000 in rent, he only is obligated to pay $1,200 in rent. And that's what Shimon's paying. So Reuven says, I'll pay your rent. How much should he pay? Because Reuven is rich, he has to pay for the full $4,000? No. We say it's section 8, and his obligation to pay is whatever Shimon had to pay. So how come when Reuven obligates himself to pay Shimon's sacrifice, does Reuven have to take upon himself what Reuven could afford when he's paying for Shimon's obligation? And the bigger question is the second part. It's logical that if, let's go step by step for a second. So the explanation is that when you accept upon yourself the responsibility of someone else, the Torah tells us that all Jews are responsible for each other. So it's possible for you to step into the shoes of someone else and to actually go to bat for someone else, and it's your thing. Think of a loan, let's say. If Shimon had a loan and Reuven was a guarantor, so then the courts would go after Reuven's possessions if Shimon wouldn't pay. It doesn't matter the fact that Shimon is poor. If Reuven's possessions are a lien for the loan of Shimon. So if Reuven is obligating himself to pay for Shimon's sacrifice, Reuven is now the guy who is, the Torah considers it as if it's his own obligation. And therefore he has to pay for the rich man's sacrifice because that's what he could do. He's able to pay more, he has to pay more. But the question is, carrying the argument further then, why does Shimon have to pay only the obligation? Why is Shimon to pay for Reuven's sacrifice then? It seems like the rabbis are trying to get all the money they can over here. Whatever happens, you pay more. So Shimon's obligation for Reuven's sacrifice, we understand. It's logical. Reuven is obligated to pay more. He has a greater debt to the temple. He owes more. So Shimon's accepting Reuven's obligation. So that we can understand. He's obligated to pay Reuven's sacrifice. The harder part to understand is why Reuven is obligated to pay Shimon's sacrifice. And the answer is that when Reuven accepts upon himself Shimon's sacrifice, he is standing in the place of Shimon. And he is now at bat. It's now become his own obligation, where he's able to assume responsibility and put himself in the shoes of Shimon to such an extent that it's now his own obligation. Because there's really two obligations over here. There's a financial obligation, and that's a certain price for the sacrifice. Then there is the idea of atonement. There's the idea that when you bring the sacrifice, something happens to your soul. Your soul is now purified and cleansed, and you have this spiritual dry cleaning. So if Reuven is obligating himself for Shimon's atonement, then Reuven has to go through the kind of atonement that would be working for Reuven. Because Reuven has put himself in Shimon's shoes. Reuven is not just accepted a financial obligation like in the case of the Section 8 apartment. Reuven has accepted the loan itself. Reuven has accepted his standing in Shimon's shoes. The Torah gives a person that ability to stand in someone else's shoes. So it's a little bit mind-blowing because on the one hand we're saying that Reuven, if Shimon himself would have made that sacrifice, let's say Shimon, the poor guy, he would have himself been the Mitzayra, and he himself would have had to bring the sacrifice. He would bring a poor man's sacrifice. And because, however, he's obligating himself for the sake of Reuven, he now has to pay a rich man's sacrifice. Beyond what he's obligated to pay if he himself had been a Mitzayra. If he himself needed an atonement, why does he suddenly now have this massive obligation upon himself when all he's doing, if he himself would have been the Mitzayra, then he would have had to only pay the poor man's sacrifice. And now he's obligating himself to pay the rich man's sacrifice, he's to pay so much more. How is he able to do that? How is he suddenly considered a rich person? Reuven becoming like Shimon and still paying the rich man's sacrifice, we could understand a little bit. He's standing up to bat for Shimon. He has to experience the atonement. But let's go back to Shimon becoming like Reuven. Shimon's accepting upon himself something larger than himself. But he's accepting it in his own shoes. So why is he obligated to pay something which doesn't fit him? And the answer is something which is very profound, and it has far-reaching implications to every area in life, period. And especially the time that we're in now. The Torah is telling us over here is, just give you an example. There's a halach like this. There are certain vows we made to God at Mount Sinai. We vowed to God at Mount Sinai, we're going to keep all God's commandments. We're going to light Shabbos candles, we're going to keep kosher, we're going to keep Shabbos. We're going to keep all of God's commandments. Let's say someone makes a vow to keep Shabbos. Is that considered a vow or not? On the one hand, you'd say, well, he's obligated to, he made that vow before at Mount Sinai. His soul vowed to God to keep the commandments. Before his soul entered the body, thousands of years ago, he was already vowing to God to keep the commandments. So this additional vow doesn't do anything. But the Talmud says it does do something. Although I already took a vow before at Mount Sinai, I'm able to summon inner strength by promising God to do something right now. I'm not saying you should make these promises because you run into a lot of trouble making promises, and the Torah says not to make promises, but there is something about making at least a good decision, bli neder. You're going to do something, don't make a vow, but deciding to yourself, promising yourself, not a vow, but promising yourself that bli neder, that you're going to do something, it gives you more of a rope to hold on to that you actually get something done. I know myself that there are things that I know I'm supposed to do, But then there's things that I made a personal this commitment to do, and it's a whole different. It means something different to me. I mean, if I have to do something because it's an obligation to do it, it's different than if I made a personal commitment to it. So that's why the Talmud says if someone made a vow to keep a mitzvah, it does something. It adds something, and it's something the Talmud says that it's a positive thing. It does connect that person more with the tefillin, more with the Shabbos, more with the kosher, more with the matzah, the fact that he had a personal vow to keep those mitzvahs. Let's go back over here now to this guy who is standing in front of the Jewish court and he's saying, I'm the poor guy, I'm a shnook, I can't afford anything, but I'm going to take upon myself to pay the sacrifices of Reuven. The court says to the guy, you have just ascended. You've just taken a leap. You've, not just the court, God, the person himself, with the help of God, has now become a rich person. His decision that he's taken upon himself something beyond his means has transported him and lifted him up and opened up new pipelines of bracha. I'll give you an example. The Rebbe brought this example numerous times. There was a man whose name was Rabbi Chanan glazier. Hana glazier, he was a chassid of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. When the previous Rebbe was in America, the previous Rebbe wanted to print a halachic work called the Stei Chemet. It wasn't a popular work then. It wasn't something people in America thought that was on the top of the New York Times bestseller list anytime soon. And it wasn't a project that people were donating so fast to. And the previous Rebbe told Rabbi Chanan glazier that he should take upon himself the cost of this project. Rabbi Chanan glazier told the previous Rebbe, I mean, I would love to, I just can't afford it. So the previous Rebbe said that we have a tradition from the author of the Tanya, from the Alter Rebbe, that when a Jew takes upon himself to give to tzedakah or to do something for Hashem, which is beyond their means, that decision itself opens up new pipelines of blessing, new opportunities in business, so that the person should be able to fulfill their obligation. And in order to have those pipelines be manifest, it only is required the person who makes that decision to make a sacrifice of one step forward. And therefore, give what you're able to give right now, and make a decision you'll be able to give more. And the previous Rebbe added something which is fascinating. I don't know who this Rabbi Chanan glazier is, but I saw the letter. The previous Rebbe says, you remember our conversation 14 years ago. 14 years ago, Rabbi Chanan glazier told the previous Rebbe, Rebbe, I love you. I love what you're doing. I want to be the one who gives the top contributor to you and to what you're doing. So the previous Rebbe said at that time, the kind of sums, the kind of money we're talking about now, was not shaykh, wasn't relevant to talk about such an enormous amount of money. And yet, because you made that decision then, we're now in a different place, and this kind of money is relevant. And so the previous Rebbe is telling him, make the decision, decide you're going to do this. And Hashem will open up pipelines of bracha, you'll be able to do this. So we see from this is that just like this person made this obligation, he's going to pay for the rich man's sacrifices. He made a decision which is beyond himself. The Torah says he has to bring the rich man's sacrifices because he could. Why can't he? He's a poor guy. He wasn't able to do it before, but now he can. By him making that decision, making that vow to Hashem, he's opened up new pipelines. He's now in a different position. That decision itself has put him in a different position. There's a similar teaching of the Sifri. It says in the Talmud, a good thought, God connects to an action. So the simple meaning of that is, if you thought to do something good, and you didn't do it, Hashem considers it as if you did it. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya gives us this more spiritual meaning to this idea. He says, if you did a mitzvah without any feeling, oh, sorry about that. You wanted to do it for the right reasons. So the Torah says that your desire know how when you're on WhatsApp and someone calls you and knocks it off? Well, airplane mode apparently doesn't. WhatsApp calls go through even on airplane mode. Okay, whatever. Anyways, so when you decide that that you're going to do a mitzvah intellectually, you have a conviction why this mitzvah is valuable, even though you're not feeling in your heart right now. The Alter Rebbe says Hashem connects your conviction, which is not emotional, just an intellectual conviction, and He raises up your mitzvahs to be. He puts that conviction as a wings to the mitzvah to allow the mitzvah to. Chasidim say a third interpretation. Chasidim say if you have a good thought, really, how could it be that that thought didn't get manifest? It must have been that you didn't really mean it. A good thought, God will bring you to and let it become manifest. It sounds a little sharp, but the Sifri said a similar idea in a positive way. Sifri said something very powerful. Sifri says, when a Jew makes a decision to do something, so God opens doors for that decision to happen. Machshava tova, you have a good thought, you want to do something, and think about yourself, and think about the world we're in now, and think about people in your life. And there are people that you think you cannot help them. You're not wise enough to help. There's a bigger situation you can help. You don't have enough money to help people. You don't have enough experience as people have all kinds of conditions that you can't be there for them because you don't know how to help addicts. You don't know how to, you're not a marriage therapist. You don't have the money to help those people who have this financial trouble. So Torah is telling us, you make a decision to be there for that person and God will open the door. That decision itself opens a pipeline of bracha of Hashem and brings the bracha, not just that you're able to help that person, but the Torah says that tzedakah is 1/5 of or 10% of our earnings. So that decision will bring lots of bracha to yourself as well. So bottom line is, we're at bat now. The time of Bias and Mashiach, time of coming of Mashiach, and our good decisions that we make now are very potent and very powerful to bring us to be able to fulfill those decisions and bring bracha upon ourselves and our families. We just need to think about people that we know that were around us, and don't have to go too far. There are people in your house all day that that need assistance and help as well, and people which are your neighbors, and people which just it requires thought and a decision that I could do this because I'm making a decision to do this, and just my decision itself opens the door. That's what I wanted to share tonight. Any questions, comments, criticism, tomatoes, cucumbers, green apple seltzer, berry seltzer, the coffee. I know Starbucks was open today, if I remember correctly. And the other coffee shops, I think they changed the whole thing. All right, I don't see anybody raising their hand for any questions. Thank you very much. Atzlacha Rabba. All the best.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.